So, Mr. Rugrats, what do you have to say about your accent being cringe and performative? How? Or that you're woke?
I thought that one was pretty obvious.
Or, even worse, that you were a Minecraft YouTuber?
Oh god, my career is over.
It's been a while since we've done a video sitting on the table, but I thought this was a good occasion. Are you holding a carrot? Yes. Is this video inspired by Lextorius's video about piracy? Yes. It's in the description. Is that Factorio music? Yes. Was that a Dank Pods reference? Yes. CSGO player or Minecraft YouTuber? I feel like those are both bad outcomes. Who winning in an oiled up twerk contest? Judy Hopps or Diane Foxington? Who the fuck is Diane Foxington? Okay, so the question I get probably the most across all of my content, what the fuck is your accent? I get fake Australian a lot, fake American a lot, fake everything, really. But the one that I got most recently, which I thought was really funny, is can we actually stop with the cringy, performative, rhotic R's? Cringe as fuck. Man, this is just how I speak. Been meaning to do this for a while, but let's talk about where my accent comes from. I was born here in Australia, and then when I was quite young, moved to Dubai and went to an international school. So I had a mix of teachers and classmates from all over the world, which meant that the influences on my accent weren't like if I had lived in Australia or the US or South Africa for my entire life. It was a bit of a mishmash of everything. And I think it's pretty noticeable in the difference between my accent and my brother's accent, particularly when we were still young. My brother adopted a very American accent very quickly, versus I always had a bit more of the mixed one. I definitely used to sound more American, and these days, most people are just like, hey, I cannot pick what your accent is. What is the deal with that? So because of that mix of influences, as well as growing up on a pretty diverse mix of media, yeah, my accent's a little all over the place. I'm fully aware. I'm 26 now, I can't change it. Why is copyright infringement on the internet referred to as piracy? Great question that I didn't know the answer to, so I had to look into it. And we probably all think of seafaring pirates, and it is related. So in 1668, a publisher was complaining about his works being stolen. Basically, people were buying his books and then making a copy of it and then selling it. And he referred to these people as land pirates. And that name just stuck. And then in 1736, so like 70 years later, a dictionary defined pirates as this: one who lives by pillage and robbing on the sea, also a plagiary, or someone that does plagiarism. And that seems like the reason that we refer to internet piracy as piracy, which I thought was pretty cool. Is that AI? Unless I am specifically talking about AI, which I have done in a few videos, I will never intentionally use an AI-generated piece of media in my videos. And I say intentionally because recently there was a controversy with Markiplier using an AI clip in one of his videos, or his editor using one. And, you know, they traced it back and they were like, yeah, we got this from a stock footage site. And I don't remember the details. It was either it wasn't labeled as AI or they missed that it was labeled as AI. But regardless, yeah, you're going through a stock footage site and you grab something, you're like, yeah, it looks good. And then it turns out to be AI. That's pretty shit. That sucks. But there are 3 AI tools that I do use in my workflow that I think it's probably good to disclose. I use Upscale for upscaling low resolution images, Flow Frames for doing frame interpolation, and then probably the most helpful one that I don't use that much anymore, but I used to use it more, is Goodbye Green Screen, which is a pretty good machine learning cutout rotoscoping tool. Works really well a lot of the time. That's not paid placement, it's just genuinely what I've used, and it's good stuff. But I also always want people to comment if they think something in my video is AI, because if it is and I missed it, I want to correct that. I want to make sure I don't make that mistake again in future. It's kind of just an issue with the internet at the moment, isn't it? So you're okay with me downloading your video and redistributing it without your permission? Yeah, kind of. This is something I talk about more in a main channel video that's going up in the next couple of months, but I don't really see piracy as strictly a bad thing in terms of how it impacts creatives. I think that piracy can be used as a not necessarily a marketing tool, but a discovery tool. Something that I did growing up is I would pirate books. I grew up on Tumblr, okay, so I did a lot of reading, and books can be kind of expensive, especially at the rate that I was reading as a teenager. I was, smashing through 3 or 4 books a week. So I would go on the internet and download those books. For most of those authors, I have gone and bought those books since because they've shaped me as a person. Anyway, that's in a video that's coming up. I think that piracy can be a really good discovery tool, and I'm not strictly against someone repurposing my content. Emphasis on repurposing and not just redistributing. Like if you just downloaded my video and uploaded it somewhere else, I would be annoyed. And there's a difference between you doing that to me and you doing that to Disney, right? Then I got this Russian comment on a video from forever ago. So forgive me if Google Translate translated this poorly. Dude, what are you talking about? You need dynamics in short and scares, but who told you that the game is pure horror? It has fairly balanced gameplay for a story-based game. Don't put all games with a scary atmosphere in the horror category. It doesn't work that way. I think I was pretty fair on Scanner Somber, and in regards to why are you calling it horror? Because the devs themselves call it a 3D horror cave exploration game on Steam. It's marketed as a horror game. But I do think that a lot of my early game reviews are maybe too harsh. And I think that review culture as a whole focuses too much on the criticism part and too little on the praise part. A lot of us grew up seeing an internet like that. Like, I grew up on CinemaSins and Angry Video Game Nerd and that sort of thing where, yeah, the criticism side is played up for comedic effect. And I think that's fine, but we also need to consider that, yeah, when there's a cultural shift towards, exaggerating the flaws of something for the sake of entertainment, it has kind of turned into exaggerating the flaws in criticism in general, not just for the sake of entertainment, that we focus on the flaws more. And that's something I am trying to be more conscious of in my work. That being said, if it's a multi-billion-dollar company and they're, putting $1 million into a production or $200 million into a production, yeah, I think it's fair to be a little more critical of those. Thoughts on indie creators? And given that you commented this on the piracy video, I assume you mean in regards to piracy. And I am very big on support indies. Support your local artists, your favorite creators, like, in any way you can directly support someone that makes art that you appreciate, I am all for. I'm subscribed to a few people's Patreons. I've donated to some of my favorite creators through Ko-Fi. I don't know how you meant to say it, but the one, all through like PayPal stuff, right? Where they have like one-time donation things. Because to me that is important, like supporting your local artists, buying indie games from small teams. A couple of my friends make games, and to me, yeah, those are really important, and I personally wouldn't pirate those. But that's also a personal morality stance. I don't think everyone should have that attitude. And yeah, in that video, my criticism of copyright law and how it's policed is more targeted at the big companies and how they use and abuse the system, and not so much some guy that made a cool little game because he wanted to. Like, they're not the same thing. Yeah, I'm not going to dig into this one too much because the next 2 videos that I've got lined up touch on a lot of these ideas. So go sub to the main channel for that one. Another one that was really common on the piracy video: why are you so entitled? And I think it's important to clarify, I don't think you're entitled to every piece of media ever. That's not the train of thought. The train of thought is that if I buy a game, whether that's, a Wii game on a disc or on Steam or through the Switch eShop or whatever, I should fucking own that game, not just a limited license to access it. And in that vein, I read an interesting thread the other day about how theoretically users could be blocked out from watching their Blu-rays on Wi-Fi enabled Blu-ray playing devices. And that's because those devices require a license. Like, they license the Blu-ray technology. So like, even if you have a Blu-ray player, if that device hasn't been licensed to play Blu-rays, big companies doing it the right way, yeah, they get a license. So like, hypothetically, if Sony was like, oh, we don't want to pay for the Blu-ray license anymore, and they stop paying for the Blu-ray license, PlayStations just stop being able to play Blu-rays. And like, yeah, Sony probably wouldn't do that because since the PS3, I think, PlayStation discs have been Blu-rays. But now that there's such a focus on digital distribution, there is totally a possibility that companies are like, oh, actually, yeah, I don't want to pay for the Blu-ray license anymore. All your physical PlayStation discs sucks. If you're connected to the internet and you do the system update, sorry, man. Yeah, we don't pay for the license anymore. It's definitely not that simple. It's more complicated than that, but the idea is there. Your number for hard drive lifespans is bullshit, and yeah, that's fair. The number that I list in the piracy video is the manufacturer like a minimum lifespan spec, and I personally have had mixed results. I've got hard drives on my computer now that I've had for a decade, and I've had other ones that have died in like 3 years. And that is, in my experience, very measurably tied to how they were used. So like the 2 drives that I've had die recently, those were both used for video production. So they, particularly when I was still in uni, they were doing a couple hundred gigabytes every week. So that was just something that was getting slammed a lot versus the drive that I've got that's just like documents and a couple of Steam games and stuff. That drive's been in there for, yeah, like close to 10 years now, and it's fine. So it definitely depends on how you're using your hard drive. It's also like with portable hard drives, the extra wear of it being, you know, in a bag, moved around and stuff, that adds to it. So there's a bunch of factors. It's definitely not as clear-cut as hard drives last 5 years. Depending on how you use them, they could last 5 to 15 years. What's your hair routine? Shower. I'm not kidding, that's it. In lockdown, I remember watching, I can't remember whose video it was, but someone did a video about not using any hair products for 6 months. And her hair was much happier by the end of it. And so I tried it. And by the end of the first month, hair was not happy because it was out of regulation, I guess. But now I very rarely use any products. Why don't you talk about something more important? That attitude is exactly why I talk about media and make the videos that I do. It's the sort of thing that many people see as pretentious or nitpicky, and those people are not thinking about the bigger picture. Think about how much media you consume in a year. And I can guarantee that you can't put a number on it. You cannot tell me how many movies you watched, how many shows you watched, how many times you sat down and watched the news, how many times you listened to the radio, or how many episodes of a podcast you would listen to. You cannot quantify that number. It is, you're constantly exposed to media in all its different forms all the time. Everything that you watch shapes your perspective on the world. That might sound dramatic. I don't care. It's true. And so with that in mind, I think it is important to depict things, regardless of if it's fiction or non-fiction, with intention and care. And I think that goes doubly so for kids' cartoons. So yeah, if I'm gonna nitpick Avatar, I'm gonna nitpick Avatar because it's influential on children. It's important. And that's why I'm also so critical of Netflix's adaptation of Avatar, which when I say I'm nitpicking Avatar, that's the one I'm referring to. That's a weird one of, you can argue it's made for the kids of the people that grew up watching Avatar. And I think that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is it's really for the millennial nostalgia of the kids that grew up watching Avatar. And I think it's bad for both parties. So yeah, I think it is important to be critical of these things because they are influential as much as it is pop culture. And, you know, we can often write off pop culture as just, you know, consumerist slop. It can be, but also because a lot of people are consuming it, that's why it's important to criticize. Why is there representation in everything? I've had this one come up in a few times, but particularly my like Star Wars isn't woke video from like a year and a half ago. That came up a lot in those comments. And I think this attitude comes from people having like a relatively small context window of like their thinking within their lifetime. But the course of representation in cinema is a much longer timeline than that. So let's do a little quick history lesson. For a good chunk of the history of cinema, shit expensive. Like, yeah, the cameras, the lights, hiring actors, getting set designers and stuff, but also just the simple fact that you have to buy reels of physical film. Yeah, this shit is not within the range of the average person. This is for the richest of the rich. And historically, in the United States, who have the richest of the rich been? Primarily, white dudes. So with that in mind, a lot of cinema at that point in time is reflective of their worldviews, their lived experience, their stories that they want to tell. And there's also the Hays Code and all of that shit as well. But largely, those two kind of line up. But then as time goes forward, particularly like around like the 60s, we start to see making movies being more accessible. So then the heterogeneous lens of the cinema industry at that point starts to dissolve. So how are people getting cameras and making movies more easily? Two things. One, the technology is getting cheaper, but number two is that a lot of the demographic groups that were previously excluded from cinema for financial and other historic reasons, civil rights movement is in the 60s, this is why there's a turning point around this point. Those people are now climbing up the economic ladder because the world is changing. And so there's few of them, but they are starting to get their foot in the door. That being said, the barrier is still pretty high. But from the 60s, you skip forward a bit, you got Super 8 film cameras in the 70s, and then in the 80s and 90s, you've got like consumer VHS-based cameras. In the early 2000s, you got the rise of digital camcorders, and in the 2010s, everyone's got a smartphone. So after the tides started changing half a century ago, more and more people have access to the tools and information to try and make a movie. More people get to tell their stories, share their worldview, share their lived experience, and that's a good thing. But like with anything being more accessible, obviously, if 1 million people are making movies every year now, more movies are shit. Like, you gotta start somewhere, right? You gotta make bad movies to eventually make good movies. That's just any creative process. It takes practice, it takes feedback, and time. That being said, the correlation between this comment's implication of why is everything woke and why is everything shit, it's the rise of consumerism. We are pumping out a gajillion fucking movies a year at this point, and particularly when, mega corporations are doing this shit, that means that, a single company is pumping out 100, 200 pieces of media a year, and so each individual piece gets less time put into it. It gets rushed out the door, and also with the amount of money that's poured into them, it's a lot of fingers in the pie. There's a lot of stakeholders that have a say in what ends up on screen. This is why we hear so many stories about creatives, particularly creatives with a very distinct voice. And I don't necessarily mean literal voice, but a distinct way of expressing, a style. They tend to clash with studios a lot, and there's a reason for that, because as soon as you're working with a large amount of money, there's just so many people involved that have a say, because it's their money that's funding the project. And I'm sure you've heard of the idea of, if you make something by council, you have a bunch of people making decisions and everyone has to be happy with it. You make something kind of crap. And that is largely why we get a lot of crap movies with bad representation in them. That being said, if you step out of, mainstream mega corporation media distribution environment, this is significantly less of an issue. So whenever I see someone complaining about, everything is shit and woke these days, I'm like, A, there's plenty of not woke stuff you can go watch. You can go into your little echo chamber and do that. Or if you do want to watch good woke stuff, you just have to look somewhere else. That being said, good representation in mainstream consumerist media is important, and I'm going to end on this little clip of Diego Luna talking about being represented in Star Wars, because I love it and I think it sums it up. Anyway, thank you for all your questions, including the people that didn't actually ask a question to be put in this Q&A, but they asked questions on other videos that I was like, that's interesting, I want to talk about it, because I didn't know where else I was going to put it. Like, they weren't enough to be their own video, and main channel videos are kind of, I try to keep them focused, so here's a good place to end up, right? I think that makes sense. Thank you for watching. Go check out main channel stuff over here. And if you're not subscribed to the second channel and you like this low-key, unplanned, silly stuff, subscribe. Well, there's the icon. You know what to do. You know how this works.